this was the only half-star review I gave this year. This is probably, I'm thinking back to last year. Yeah, worse than the worst movie of last year. Last year was Artemis Fowl. This is worse than that movie. This is an early contender for one of the worst movies of the decade, because this thing is unequivocally repugnant. It is my number one worst film of the year. God's Not Dead, We the People. Now, I'll preface this by saying I've sat through every single God's Not Dead movie that they've made. And I'm just going to say this right now, religious beliefs aside, if you have to make 4 movies that are convincing me of the same premise that God's not dead, the dude's probably dead. That's number one. Number 2, I'm not going to go incredibly long-winded here just because the internet is already clouded with opinions, or with my opinion on this movie. You know what's funny is that since I published my review on October 5th, because it premiered in theaters October 4th, since I have published my review on October 5th, I'm not even kidding. When I look at my site analytics for stevepulaski.com, it consistently ranks as one of the top 10 most viewed articles of any given day. Any given day.
Wow.
It has been far and away the most successful review on my website, which is hilarious too, because it's also gotten me some good vitriolic emails as well. But I'll stand by them, and I'll stand by every single word in this review too, which you can read at stevepulaski.com, and I would highly encourage, because I want to keep the top 10 streak alive. But this is the third sequel to the runaway Christian sleeper hit of 2014. And the kindest thing I could say about this movie was that the family I saw it next to, they were super friendly. They were very good people, and I hope they do not take this movie too seriously, although I do have my doubts. This movie is not only the worst in a very misbegotten series, but it is so utterly deplorable that its status as a 3-night-only Fathom event in theaters at least assures that significantly fewer people saw it in theaters and probably know of its existence than they did the previous 3 movies. All of these movies focus on the absence of Christianity from public education in America. That's not really a spoiler. All 3 of these movies in some aspects do that. But God's Not Dead, We the People is flawed from the jump, because it focuses on a non-existent issue that I didn't realize was controversial. And even digging into this thing for the day after I saw it, even digging into this issue before and while I wrote the review, I still can't find any real meaningful controversy about government infringement and homeschooling. And this speaks to the number one thing that fuels so many of these politically minded movies disguised as religious movies, is that they love that persecution complex. They absolutely thrive off of it. And this movie too suggests that there's an incoming congressional attack on the practice of homeschooling. And I do not want to tell the screenwriter of this movie, Tommy Blaze, such a thing, because he might have to go back to the drawing board and conjure up a movie that wasn't based solely out of an illegitimate fear. Again, I've said so much about this movie. My review is, I think, like 15, 16 paragraphs. But this movie is made at the end of the day for people who want to waste precious hours of their day, particularly the generation that worked hard for their money and is now spending their remaining years on a diet of cable news. The elder generation of people who may indeed and probably will live healthier, more fruitful lives than the next generation. They would rather spend their time living in a fearful state of mind than cherishing their remaining years. This movie is for the people that fear that every year there's going to be edibles in their kids' Halloween candy. That's what this thing is. There's no movement to end homeschooling. There's no movement to abolish Christian homeschooling, religious public schools, nor places of worship. It doesn't matter.
But Steve, there is, in my mind.
Exactly. And it just gets, I'll end with this, because I could keep going. Because I mean, on top of just whether or not you want to agree with the political centric argument of this movie too, it's also just uniformly not a very well made movie to begin with. Shots are very zoomed in and close up. This is an awkwardly spaced movie, an awkwardly masked movie too. But beyond that, though, there's far more harmful things going on with it. Is that in a time too when we have like anti-Semitic attacks and attacks on Muslims, these God's Not Dead movies consistently remind you that it's the dominant religion in this country that is at the most risk. Because dare anybody tell them to be the least bit empathetic and understanding. And that is the trigger for this. And I honestly loved, far more entertaining than the movie, was the Twitter threads from two individuals who work for the Coalition for Responsible Home Education. And I sent these to you two when these took place. Is that they took to social media to talk about how that their organization was, number one, grossly misrepresented, but number two, not even contacted about their portrayal, which is a gross violation of filmmaking ethics, number two. And number three, the fact that it posits a member of that as like, or a member of the homeschooling coalition, I believe, as anti-vax, is a whole other can of worms as well. This is a vile, repugnant movie to its very core, a harmful piece of propaganda, probably the worst movie of this or any other year. It's god awful. God's not dead, we the people.
Steve, all I'm going to say is, Steve, I'm actually very disappointed in you that not only are you sexist, you are actually also religiously intolerant. So we're not even going to entertain your thoughts. Joe, let's just move on to my number one. We can't do that anymore. So my number one is God's Not Dead, We the Fuck You People. This is disgusting, bro. So actually, I should mention, Steve,
available the same store that sells Let's Go Brandon merch. Damn.
Listen. Steve, you said that the people who sat next to you were very kind people, and I'm actually very glad for that. And I if you believe in if you're a Christian or Catholic or any denomination thereof, and you believe in God and Jesus, awesome, dude. That is your right. That is your right as given by the Constitution. First Amendment right there. Awesome. And I do believe that there are some very peaceful minded Christians. Chelsea is one of them. She's a Methodist, and she is a loving one at that. The people in my theater were not that. They were objectively not that. Dude, when David A.R. White, AR-15 White, is doing his big Mr. Smith Goes to Washington-esque speech at the climax of the movie, and everyone's clapping in the movie. No one clapped in the theater, but when the movie ended, I can feel it that everyone did want to clap on that scene, because I talked about this in our original review, but dude, when the credits started rolling, first of all, I could tell that I was the only one in that theater wearing a mask. But anyway, yeah, dude. As soon as the credits started rolling, there were some paltry claps, and then there were some harder claps, and then there was a guy going, "Yeah, hey, everyone, you got to go out into your communities." This is what I actually have audio of this. I believe we showed it.
Yeah.
We did play it on the show.
And then God interfered by muting the audio.
Dude, it was freaking crazy. No hands were thrown. It wasn't that crazy. There was no violence, but it's like this mindset really does manifest physically in one form or the other. You can say it's just on the screen, and that it's like, oh, it's like video games. It's like all the, people we run over in Grand Theft Auto, that doesn't manifest. Well, goddamn, if you had tried to make that same argument with God's Not Dead, it'd be a harder sell, because this truly is American Christian propaganda, 1000%. And you can make the argument that everything is propaganda. Probably dictionary-wise, you're right. But my God, this is the pinnacle of that. Not only is this Bible thumping to the umpth degree, but it is America. It is America to the max degree. Every freaking stereotype. You got two for one. You got the Asian stereotype of the God-fearing Chinese Chinese Christian man who's just trying to believe in religion, and godless communist China. Hey, I'm not a big fan of the People's Republic myself. I can go on a rant about that, but my God, this movie goes hard on that angle. You've also got the good African immigrant pastor himself as well, saying that life was tough in Africa. There was violence and religious persecution, which is true. But again, some points are kind of true-ish, but when the context is surrounded by a fundamental misunderstanding of education, which yes, or rather, no, there is no persecution as of this moment of homeschooling in this country. Christianity is not under attack. That's just what it feels like when you're actually, for once, trying to separate church and state as was intended. This is a mess of a movie. I don't even need to go into the technicalities of it, but man, when the black congressman in this movie is also trying to say that essentially slavery wasn't that bad, or rather, the slaves they work their way out of slavery on their own bootstraps. So I even forget what it was, but it's like, you are really hitting every talking point here, and this is an evil movie. There's no way you can be this precise in your propaganda without knowing that you're being propaganda, and two, being disingenuous. You have, like so many other conservative talking heads, I think you're actually smart enough to know, and you're not delusional enough to believe, at least the people with this movie, the people at the very top, Vance Null, Tommy Blaze, and the David A.R. White. It's like, dude, this has to be disingenuous, and this has to be like a grift with your pure flicks entertainment here. This is
pinnacle peak now.
Else. 100%. And honestly, the last thing I'll say is that I do think back on that night when I watched it in the theater, and I have to think, some of the people in that theater are probably dead from the virus right now, and I do feel bad for them. God, so as much vitriol as I have against the clear propaganda aspect, the evil politics of this movie, I do feel bad for the people who are being manipulated here in cable news, in the theaters with this film, and so many other aspects of their life. Yeah, dude, it must suck to be a boomer.
Yeah, it's a repugnant movie to its very core. And with that, Joe, what is your number one?
I don't even want to give it anymore. Like, how am I supposed to follow up with between those two? Look, and after talking about Evan Hansen very well could be my number one. So maybe one day I'll wake up on the right side of the bed and go, yeah, you know what, I was wrong for putting this here, but it is still a bad movie. I didn't see God's Not Dead. I really wish I went that night with Dom. I would have probably gotten into an argument with those people because I just don't hold back against them anymore. But my number one, not religious at all, is Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City. And just saying the title after what you guys went on about just makes me feel even stupider for just going to see something like this.
We need some escapism. We got too real over here. Come on, I want to hear about this movie.
I'm glad you watched this for us. Go ahead.
Same, I am too.
I went to the theater to go see this. This was a last minute thing around Thanksgiving time, I think is when this came out. And I was like, I just want to go see something. I'm like, you know what? I'm actually excited for this because to me, a good Resident Evil movie very well could just easily be a literal zombie B flick. It doesn't have to be some AAA studio budget, like high end, like multi-million-dollar film. No, I mean the games are just zombies. Yeah, they go a little bit crazy, but if you want to start from the beginning, they were just about zombies with some haunted house stuff in there as well, with giant spiders and snakes and stuff. This movie fucked up bad, man. Between the casting here of the misguided casting of trying to be yeah, look, we're gonna bring the characters from the games into the movies now, not like that Paul W.S. Anderson movie where they didn't really do that, but you miscasted one of the fan favorites, Leon. Which, hey, look, Hollywood, I'm all about want to go for more diversity nowadays. You want to have, minorities lead, you want to have people of color lead, whatever you want to do. I'm all for it. Women in, behind the camera, everybody behind the camera, whatever. But if there was ever a time to cast a blonde hair, blue-eyed pretty boy, it was for the role of Leon Kennedy in Resident Evil, one of the most iconic characters of that video game franchise. And instead they didn't do it. And not only did they not do it, but you give it to a guy who's a person of color and you make him an idiot throughout the film. one, you're just disrespecting the fans. Two, you're disrespecting this actor. Three, you're just not helping any of those racist people out there being like, oh, here we go, we're just pandering, look what they did with Leon, they just made him an idiot. Like, you didn't make the character likable at all or anything. This movie is very much a CW movie. Everybody in this movie is pretty looking. Like, and I like, look,
those are two letters you don't want to associate with Resident Evil.
No.
The dialogue is very CW-ish. The actors, their acting capability is CW-ish, and they look like they're straight out of CW. I mean, one of them is from the CW, one of them's from Arrow. To me, it's just like, man, the CW is something you don't want to associate, as Steve was saying, with Resident Evil. If you want to do this, man, just do some gritty grindhouse film. How long is it going to take until we get really a grindhouse Resident Evil film? And some can argue Paul W.S. Anderson did that with his movies, and I can see that. This though, I mean, they try to be like, hey, look, we're doing things from the game. Here's the mansion from the game. They only get the entrance to the mansion, and that's it. Everywhere else in the mansion is like, it could have been like the hallway of a basic studio. Hey, look, we got the front desk of the police station like in the game. Everywhere else in the police station is literally the exact same hallways I think they use for the mansion. They tried combining the first video game and the second video game in the one movie, and when I heard that, I was like, all right, this can either be a dumpster fire or they actually had something here when it came to adapting this. And of course, it's the first thing I said. I hated this. I never actually had this happen in the theater. This is how I knew, like, this might be probably the worst film I've ever seen this year, until I started talking about Evan Hansen and realized how much I hated that more. There's literally a scene. I was in a pretty crowded theater. I would say to about 15 to maybe 20 people in my theater. There is, and I probably will show you guys this after the show. There's a scene involving a truck driver who's one of the worst actors I've ever seen too. He crashes the truck, blows up because he got bitten by a zombie dog, and dies. But the way this is all edited, shown, and executed, I laughed my ass off. And I wasn't the only one. I think everybody was laughing at this movie in the theater. I've never experienced something like that, where everybody is laughing at a movie. To where, like, I had to get up for a second and just, like, go get a drink of water and then come back and watch the movie. Maybe the 2 minutes I missed were amazing, but I doubt it. Yeah, Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City is generic. It's dumb. It's not fun, though. And God, I can't believe I'm saying this again just to bring it back all around, but how the hell did Paul W.S. Anderson do it better than you guys did? You guys should be ashamed of yourselves, man.